Vahti, and thank you to other speakers, my colleagues who were speaking before me. I really appreciate what you said, and I agree with what has been said. And I want to thank you also, Asami, for your words that Ukrainians are the most freedom-loving people. I've been living in Ukraine like all of my life. I had a brief period of study abroad in Italy, and I made a conscious decision after graduating, despite the opportunities that I had to stay abroad, to continue, doing an academic career or any other career, to return to Ukraine and to contribute to the development of this country. That was back in 2013. And, the irony was that several months after I returned to Ukraine with this conscious decision to work here as a journalist, protests at Maidan Square began, the revolution of dignity. That was actually my second revolution. In 37 years of my life, I participated and I witnessed two revolutions in Ukraine. One was the Orange Revolution in 2004. I was still a journalism student back then. And, I was in the square distributing leaflets to the people who were camping there for weeks in freezing temperatures, people from all over Ukraine who protested against an attempt to rig the election, who wanted to have a free election, who were caring, about democratic process, who wanted to, return this right and give back this right, get back the right to have a free and fair election and to have the leaders that they want to have and they voted for, not that, someone who was decided on top here in Kyiv or maybe even in Moscow. So that was my first revolution. And the second was in 2013 and 2014, the revolution of dignity, when again Ukrainians protested against the decision of the government to reverse the course of its rapprochement with the European Union. Then Russian President Yanukovych decided that he would not sign an association agreement with the EU, and people protested against that because they saw the future of Ukraine in a family of free and democratic nations. And that protest ended in bloodshed when 100 protesters were shot in central square of Kyiv. I was, during those months, this revolution lasted for several months. I was there almost daily, reporting from there, writing, also like tweeting and talking to people, and just witnessing these historical events. Of course, me and no one, I think, in Ukraine at that point thought that the war is possible, that Russia would respond to this Ukrainians' desire to be, a free and democratic country, to be a part of the Western world with military action. Russia annexed Crimea. Russia launched its special forces into Donbass to foment an uprising there, and also Russian citizens and Russian agents were participating in in seizing of the governmental offices in Donetsk and Luhansk regions back in 2014. And since then, for 8 years, Russia has been financing, supplying the military forces fighting against the Ukrainian armed forces in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And since February 2014 of this year, Russia launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Well, I think maybe I was not, I was one of probably few people around me here in Ukraine who believed that Russia could launch this full-scale invasion. Most of my contacts, even journalists, were really, they were refusing somehow to believe that all those warnings that, we were receiving from the US or from the UK and from other Western countries' intelligence, they were true. So most people still, I don't know, it's difficult to explain why there was this sort of denial. Of course, the Ukrainian government also tried to downplay the risk, but even people who are very well informed, who, as I said, my colleagues, journalists who are receiving, reading the news and reading all these warnings from the Western intelligence, and they had no reason actually to doubt, the authenticity of this data. They still somehow I refuse to believe that the full-scale invasion and a full-scale war is possible. And I think it was because, we are just like you. We lived in a country that was, free, and democratic. It was the country where we went to the elections every several years, where we elected our representatives. Ukraine is the country that had the freedom of speech, that was functioning media, diverse media scene. Ukraine has a strong civil society with a lot of NGOs who kept the government accountable and reacted to any attempt to, somehow concentrate the power or I don't know, adopt some law that people didn't agree with. So we had this feeling that like we are a part of the free world. Of course, there are still a lot of problems with the corruption, with the other things, but we are fighting with that and we are faring pretty well. Like we are in our own house and we are sorting out our problems, because in fact, despite the war that Russia launched back in 2014 on Donbass, Ukraine has been making remarkable progress in different areas since then, in the last 8 years. Ukraine has seen a steady economic growth despite the pandemic. The IT sector in particular was booming in Ukraine, and many IT professionals emerged in these years who were working with various international companies, and a lot of Ukrainian IT startups also made their way onto the global scene. So, a lot of people in Ukraine, they had this international exposure. They were working with colleagues in other countries, especially as the pandemic made online work something like normal and ordinary. And that's why I think for millions of my compatriots here, it didn't even occur that this like normality that we had and the fact that, the country is developing, that it's a free and democratic country, just like any Western country, that it could be somehow put in danger. Of course, we heard all the, rhetoric coming from the Kremlin. We've heard Russian propaganda announcing their plans to attack Ukraine. But most people in Ukraine just shrugged it off. They thought, well, they are just making a fuss, for some domestic, for the domestic audience, for to consolidate the grab on power that Putin had, and I think this was, of course, something that for many it was a surprise. So, but as I said, I was an exception probably, because several days before Russia launched the full-scale invasion, I actually, told my husband that we should take our kid and we have to go to our relatives in Western Ukraine. I don't know like how it happened, and I felt very guilty initially because no one around me was making a similar move. People were just staying put, going to work, and even like those people I told about my decision, and I actually encouraged them to consider doing the same. But I felt guilty and I felt a bit like silly, because I was like, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm overestimating it, this threat. But I thought, okay, we will just do this, kind of go on a vacation to Western Ukraine and we'll see what happens, because as I said, we have like relatives here. And on the morning of February 24th, I woke up it was still dark outside, so I think it was like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., still pretty early. And the first thing I did was grabbing my phone, as I did on previous mornings. And then, I saw the news on the Interfax News Agency website that Russia started attacking from multiple directions. Like I woke up my husband and I told him like it started, the war has started. And then after like I think 10 minutes, we were all like the relatives and us and everyone who lived in the same house in front of the TV and watching the latest news. And in the next hours, we were on the phones with our relatives and friends in Kyiv, telling them, "Come here, we have place for you. Take your children." So. And even now, like in the house where we are staying here in Western Ukraine, we are hosting internally displaced people from Kyiv and the other Ukrainian regions, because this part of the country, Western Ukraine, has become a hub for millions of Ukrainians who are fleeing from other parts of the country. So, to cut the long story short, I just wanted the message that I wanted to convey here today is that I'm in relative safety now. My family is in relative safety here in Western Ukraine. But in fact, no part of Ukraine is safe. Russia is launching missile strikes, missile attacks on the western part of the country, where millions of people fled, hoping that it would be safer. Just a couple of days before, Russia attacked Lviv, a major city in Western Ukraine, killing 7 people and injuring more than a dozen, including children. no part of Ukraine is safe. Of course, we are watching very closely and with huge anxiety what is happening, in Kharkiv, in Mariupol, in Donbass, elsewhere. We are very happy that Ukrainian armed forces managed to liberate the northern part of the country, that they kicked Russians out from Kyiv region, from Chernihiv region, from Sumy region. And actually, we've all seen what they did there, the horrific human rights violations, war crimes, execution of civilians, massive rape, looting, torture. Just today, I talked to a person from Chernihiv region whose brother is missing after being taken by Russian soldiers back on March 4th. So for a month and a half, he hasn't heard anything from his brother, and the brother was only taken by Russians because they suspected that he was passing some information to the Ukrainian armed forces. However, like his brother says that he hasn't done anything like that. So they basically took people for no reason, and their relatives didn't know what happened to them. Another person who was taken with him was found murdered, killed on the position of where Russian troops were staying. All these stories are emerging every day, and we know that these things are continuing in those territories that are currently under Russian occupation in the south of Ukraine, in the east of Ukraine. There are reports of kidnappings, disappearances, enforced deportations. 500,000 of Ukrainians have been forcefully deported to Russia against their own will, and these people are taking their documents from them, are taking their IDs. They cannot return to Ukraine. They're being sent to remote areas of Russia. So a massive scale of human rights abuses and repression that is going on now on the occupied territories. And if Russia is not stopped, if Russia is allowed to grab more Ukraine's territory, this is going to happen everywhere. I know that if Russia wins in Ukraine, if it's allowed to win in Ukraine, I will not be able to stay in this country. My life will be in danger. I'm not sure if I'll be able to survive, but I will, even if I will have to flee. I will have to go away. And so many of my, not just journalists, but many Ukrainians, not only activists, not only those who are fighting, contributing to the development of Ukraine, working in NGOs, working in human rights organizations, in the civil society organizations, journalists, they all definitely are the first targets of the Russians. But even, ordinary millions of Ukrainians who just hold the Ukrainian flag in their house, who speak Ukrainian language, who know the words of the Ukrainian national anthem, they will become targets as well. Russia will just perpetrate a genocide of a massive scale. I just want all of you to be conscious of this, that, Russia will not stop in Donbass. It will not stop somewhere. No one in Ukraine is safe and can be safe unless there is a defeat of Russia, unless Russia is defeated and Ukraine wins this war. We are not saying in Ukraine when this war ends. We are saying when Ukraine wins. And this should be also the desire and the goal, I think, of the all free world, to make everything possible so that Ukraine wins this war. Thank you.